All right, welcome back, folks. I'm Jake Ellenbogen. Special thanks, as always, to Bleacher Report for having me. And today, since it's a little dead, right? It's the dead period of the off season. It doesn't get any more dead than July. We are going to be doing an all-time Rams roster. This is going to incorporate the fearsome foursome Rams, the 80s Rams, the 90s Rams, today's Rams, the 40s Rams. We are talking about the entirety of the LA Rams, the St. Louis Rams, and the Cleveland Rams. Everyone is eligible to be on this roster. Who's going to be on it? Well, you can see the offensive starters right away. Before I explain my picks here, my thoughts, just want to let you guys know that you can follow me on all social media at JK Bogan, including on this app at JK Bogan. Also, you can follow my YouTube channel or subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's just called Jake Ellenbogen. And yeah, let's get started. So with quarterback, Kurt Warner has always been my pick for the all-time Rams. And I understand, you're going to get pushback from, a lot of the older fans, and I get that. First off, he's not the all-time leader in passing. Not his fault. The Rams gave up on him. Jim Everett is. Jim Everett's not on this list. I love Jim Everett. Jim Everett has come on my show before, so it's nothing against him. But I do think Kurt Warner was the greatest quarterback in Rams history. I still believe that to be the case. I know Mark Bulger has, he's up there in fourth quarter comebacks and all that. He's up there in passing yards. I know Roman Gabriel is going to be a name that's mentioned. I think the reality of it is you have to feel good if you're a Rams fan. The entirety of the Rams franchise, they have had some great quarterbacks, and obviously Norm Van Brocklin is one of them, but Bob Waterfield is another. Waterfield has his number retired. You can't wear 7. You can wear 13, but you cannot wear 7, and that's because of Bob Waterfield. So have to give mention to all those guys, but end of the day, I'm going to go with Kurt Warner. And look, I'm going to tell you something right now. I think there's a guy that's surpassed everybody else and is right behind Kurt Warner. And if this kind of gives it away, as you can kind of tell where I'm going, it's Matthew Stafford. If Stafford wins the Super Bowl this year, like I think he can do, I think he can surpass Kurt Warner. I really do believe that. I think if we made this next year, coming off another Matthew Stafford Super Bowl, I think he'd be the quarterback. So then you see running back, and obviously you see pictured there is Marshall Faulk. And this is not easy. When you're talking about, the Rams running backs, I mean, there are so many great ones. Steven Jackson is the all-time rushing leader for the Rams. Todd Gurley is tied with Marshall Faulk all-time for touchdowns rushing for the Rams. Eric Dickerson has the single-season rushing yards record that doesn't look like it's ever going to get broken. Deacon Dan Towler was fantastic. I mean, Lawrence, that's the thing. Like Lawrence McCutcheon, you got all these guys, right? Kyron Williams, we'll see how far he goes, but he looks fantastic as well. So the Rams have had a bevy of really talented running backs, and so it was hard to narrow it down. I decided to go with Marshall Faulk here. The reason being is because of the passing game, what he can do in the passing game. In addition to that, though, it's not just, of course, the passing game. He was a better ball carrier. The fumbles were way more aplenty for Eric Dickerson, and Marshall Faulk had the ball more. He played more games with the Rams. So with that said, it wasn't easy at all. But I'll tell you right now, love Marshall Faulk, love Eric Dickerson. I've talked to them both. It's tough, but I'm going to go with Faulk because of the pass protection, the pass catching, and of course the ball security. I think both guys are fantastic. They're top 5 running backs all time. And I actually think Marshall Faulk is the greatest running back of all time, which is why he's here. So then we have wide receiver. Isaac Bruce comes in as the number 1 receiver. He's the all-time leading receiver in Rams history, so that's kind of not really a surprise. A 4-time Pro Bowler in his own right. Never was an all-pro first team because, well, let's be honest here, they just did not know what they were doing. He had 1,781. That's 1,781 yards. He had quite the season without any sort of Kurt Warner, Mark Bulger. I mean, he had, like Mark Rippon and He didn't have a lot. Okay. So what we saw is Isaac Bruce as the number one guy without Torrey Holt could be the best receiver in the league. And, it took him forever to get into the Hall of Fame. He finally did, which is great. So I can say Hall of Famer, all-time leading Rams receiver. To me, no brainer. Bruce is the number one receiver. Number two receiver, basically a number one receiver in addition to that, is Torrey Holt. Okay. Torrey Holt is fantastic. Torrey Holt was fantastic. 7-time All-Pro, 7-time Pro Bowler, All-Pro, Super Bowl champion, second all-time leading receiver in Rams history. I mean, fantastic player. And they called him Big Game for a reason. So he's number two. Number three, Cooper Kupp. Okay. When I first did this, the first time I ever did this, Cooper Kupp was not even talked about. Okay. Cooper Kupp was not there. Robert Woods was an honorable mention. It was 2017 or 2018. I forget when I did it. But anyway, doing it now, Cooper Kupp has really, taken off in Rams history. He's a Super Bowl MVP. He's a Super Bowl champion by virtue of that. Pro Bowler, All-Pro, Offensive Player of the Year, and he's fourth all-time in Rams receiving. Okay, so this is somebody who's really climbed the rungs here, and it's not going to be long before we talk about Puka Nacua. It's not going to be long before we talk about, Cooper Kupp. Can he get to number two? He's going to be the number three all-time leading receiver. We'll see how high he can go. But, the reality is you have those three guys all over the field with Kurt Warner throwing you the football, and you got Marshall Faulk, pass protection, or, even coming out of the backfield as a pass catcher. You're in good shape. So that leads us to tight end, and I went with Tyler Higbee here because he's the best tight end in Rams history. Whether you want to hate on him for that or not, he's the Super Bowl champion, which you can't take away, and he's the all-time leading tight end in Rams history. Now, do we expect that? I don't know, okay? I don't know if we expected that, but this is what ended up happening. And Higbee is a reliable target. He's somebody that has, been around before McVay, so it's not like he is a, regime favorite. I mean, he's gone from two different regimes. He was with the Jeff Fisher era Rams, and he's stuck with the Sean McVay Rams. It shows a lot about, who he is and, how hard he's worked, and he's gotten some contracts, and he's coming back from a brutal ACL tear. So hopefully he can, fully come back from that. But regardless, he's etched in stone as the number one Rams tight end in their history. So we move on to the offensive line, the big fellas in the trenches. We'll start with Orlando Pace here. Pace, cornerstone of the greatest show on turf, okay? They went up, they traded for him. There was a reason why they went up to trade for him. Orlando Pace, Hall of Famer, 7-time Pro Bowler, 3-time All-Pro. He's on the Hall of Fame All-2000s team, Super Bowl champion. He had 154 starts. And I'm not going to lie to you, I think Andrew Whitworth could absolutely had an argument if he played a little bit earlier with the Rams, but I'm going to give longevity to Pace here. And Pace was fantastic, so it's not like a bad thing either. So left guard is Tom Mack. In case you guys don't know, he played his full career with the Rams, and he was fantastic. 11-time Pro Bowler, 176 starts, and a Hall of Famer in his own right. Tom Mack, incredible. Also a big fan of Kent Hill, but anytime you have Tom Mack, it's kind of hard to justify anybody else. Absolutely fantastic player. Doug Smith is who I went with at center. 160 starts, 6-time Pro Bowler. Both of the Rams' top centers in their franchise history, him and, of course, Rich Saul, both were 6-time Pro Bowlers, and Rich Saul was fantastic. But the problem is I had to decide between the two. I went with the guy who started 160 games as opposed to the guy who started 106. Then we move on to Dennis Harrah, who was also fantastic, 144 starts at the Rams, 6-time Pro Bowler, All-Pro. Dennis Harrah went with him here. I think this offensive line would absolutely be cooking. This is one of the best, in my opinion, this is one of the best all-time roster offenses that you're going to see, okay? It would be so hard to stop this team. Now, the one glaring weakness of this entire roster, at least on the offensive side, is Tyler Higbee. Let's not kid ourselves. But Higbee is a good player. And if you had Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt and Cooper Kupp and Marshall Faulk, you had this offensive line, you had Kurt Warner slinging the rock, Tyler Higbee would probably be pretty good. He would probably have more opportunities. So it's not that he would even struggle there. And so we move on to the last piece of this starting offensive line is Jackie Slater, Mr. Ram himself, 259 games, 211 starts with the Rams, all with the Rams, Hall of Famer, 7-time Pro Bowler, absolutely fantastic resume. No doubter, has to be on the all-time roster. And so that's how we have it there for the starters. Moving on to the offensive backups, this will surprise you. So fair warning. We move on. Matthew Stafford is the backup quarterback of the all-time roster. And this was tough for me because I'm a big football historian. I love the Rams history. I don't think it's talked about enough. So I don't want to come off as just one of those guys, oh, he's 28-year-old kid saying Matthew Stafford is the Rams all-time backup. Like, let's ignore the fact that Norm Van Brocklin and Bob Waterfield and, Jim Everett and, Roman Gabriel. Let's just ignore all those players and let's say Matthew Stafford. How stupid. No, there's a reason. Okay. I'm very well aware of the history. I've done a lot of research on a lot of these guys. I always have. I just wish the NFL would preserve their history better. But the reality is Matthew Stafford is absolutely deserving of being the backup quarterback. And it won't be long before, in my opinion, he is the starting quarterback of the Rams all-time roster. Because the thing about Matthew Stafford that people will use against him is the lack of accolades. He's had years where he's had almost 5,000 yards passing and doesn't even get a Pro Bowl nomination. Okay? It's because he was in Detroit, because no one cares about Detroit. They're starting to, but no one cared before. So Matthew Stafford absolutely deserves to be the backup here. He's a Super Bowl champion. He's a big reason why they won the Super Bowl. Without Odell Beckham Jr. and Robert Woods and Tyler Higbee, who we just mentioned. Oh, and Kendall Blanton getting hurt on the first snap of the game, when he was supposed to be the starting tight end. And oh, by the way, all the injured running backs that he was dealing with. Okay, let me be honest here. Matthew Stafford in his limited time with the Rams has done wonders. I'm not talking about any of his stats from Detroit. I don't care. What he's done with the Rams has been fantastic. And if you really look at it, all time for the passer rating, right? All-time passer rating as a Ram, he's just behind Kurt Warner for the number one spot. Okay, he's been everything and more that you could ask for. And so at the end of the day, I'm going to stick with Matthew Stafford here. I really thought about this. I think if I wasn't going to go with Stafford, I'd probably go with Bob Waterfield just because of what he could do all over the place, on the ground, through the air, even kicking. And of course, he has his number retired. But I'm going to go with Matthew Stafford here. That's what I'm going to do. And I think it won't be long before he ends up being the starter of this team. Okay. And I think it won't be long before people start actually looking at him as the greatest quarterback in Rams history. And again, he needs to win another Super Bowl for that to happen, but I think it's possible. The backup running back for this team behind Marshall Faulk is Eric Dickerson. When I look at Dickerson, it was really hard to keep him out of the starting lineup. And to be honest with you, we would probably not even use a tight end because this team would be so freaking epic. We would probably just have a split backfield with Eric Dickerson and Marshall Faulk. That's probably what I would do, okay, if I'm being honest. So with that said, Eric Dickerson, 5-time Pro Bowler, 4-time All-Pro at the Rams, Rookie of the Year, single-season rushing yards record, Hall of Famer, 3-time MVP runner-up, which is absolutely insane. He is the backup here for Faulk, but I would probably go split back. Either way, he makes this roster. Then you look, Elroy Hirsch, okay? Crazy Legs Hirsch was incredible. He had one of the craziest seasons ever back in the 50s when, passing wasn't like it is today, okay? And this is somebody in only 12 games. He had over 1,400 yards receiving. He was fantastic. Elroy Crazy Legs Hirsch is one of the most underrated players, not only in Rams history, but maybe just history in general. And he doesn't get talked about nearly enough. So I had to put him in there, as well as Henry Ellert. Talking about underrated players, Henry Ellard is the third all-time leading receiver for the Rams. He was one of the highest, more production than most receivers when he retired. For whatever reason, he wasn't even a finalist in last year's Hall of Fame voting. He also should be a Hall of Famer. So Henry Ellard. And then I had Tom Fears, who I think people kind of don't really know where to put him. In today's day and age, Tom Fears is probably a tight end. But since he didn't actually play tight end, I didn't want to put him there. I felt like that was cheating. So I decided to put him as the third receiver backup. And then, of course, the backup for Tyler Higbee, who actually statistically was more efficient than Tyler Higbee, Pete Holohan. He wasn't there forever, but when he was there, averaged 33.9 yards per game, only played 48 games with the Rams. Billy Truex ended up with more yards. And I think back in the day when I did this, I didn't realize Billy Truex played longer. But the better player and the more efficient player was Pete Holohan. And that is why he is the backup for Tyler Higbee, because he was more efficient than Tyler Higbee, if you really look at the stats, and more efficient than Billy Truex. However, Higbee, all-time leader, not going to take it away from him. He gets the starting nod. It's really unfortunate that Steven Jackson was left off this list. I have to say that. It's just when you talk about these running backs, it is so hard. Okay, I loved Steven Jackson, but it kind of goes to show you there's not really a bias here for me because I grew up with Steven Jackson. I didn't get I never got any of Eric Dickerson. The only Eric Dickerson that I've been able to watch are the games that are on YouTube. Okay, and I've gone through and I've watched him. He's a fantastic player, and I got a chance to interview him. But I saw a little bit of Marshall Faulk, and I saw a lot of Steven Jackson and Todd Gurley. But the reality is they just have some of the craziest running backs that you'll ever see in an organization. So not really much I could do there. Going into the trenches here, I decided to go with Andrew Whitworth. Wasn't easy. Wanted to go with Charlie Cowan, but really decided, Andrew Whitworth, 71 starts with the Rams, All-Pro, Pro Bowler, Super Bowl champion, Man of the Year. I mean, he was fantastic. He appeared in 2 Super Bowls for the Rams. Just everything that you could have asked for. And I would argue that while Orlando Pace was the cornerstone, in my opinion, he was the cornerstone of the greatest show on turf, I would argue that Andrew Whitworth was the cornerstone of that Super Bowl team, of that run with Sean McVay. Without Andrew Whitworth, do the Rams do what they did? Do they protect Jared Goff? Do they protect Matthew Stafford? I'm going to say they don't. Okay, so the reality is he was huge, and that's why he's the backup on this team. Ken Hill, I'm just a huge fan of. Multiple-time Pro Bowler. He's the backup there. I already mentioned Rich Saul as why he's the backup and not the starter. Then Tom Newberry. Hear me out here. Newberry is fantastic. Newberry had multiple Pro Bowls. Newberry was a left guard, but he's by far the best option to be the backup guard. So I'm going to move him here to right guard. I'm sure he won't mind being on the roster there. And then backing up Jackie Slater is Rob Havenstein. I think, and I'll say this right now, and I mean no disrespect to anybody who previously played, but I think to this day, Rob Havenstein is so underrated, and he's never going to be in any sort of conversation for, the Hall of Fame or anything like that. But he started all 130 games that he's played with the Rams. He's a Super Bowl champion. He's a model of consistency. He has been an absolute workhorse. He's played through injury. And this is somebody who is a Pro Bowl level player. He's never been a Pro Bowler. Okay. Reason being is back in the day, you'd have the best the rushing attack, best running game, and pretty much everybody across the board would make the Pro Bowl. Okay. That's what happened. So unfortunately, that's not the case anymore. So Rob Havenstein did not get that opportunity. He didn't get clumped in when they were the number 1 offensive line of the year, which, by the way, they were. It happened. They won the Built Ford Tough Offensive Line of the Year award. Rob Havenstein didn't get any credit for that. So reality is that Rob Havenstein should probably be a 3-time Pro Bowler based on, what has happened in the past. He is not. So I'm going to give him his accolade here. So that's what I will say about that. Now we move on to the defense. Everyone wants to know, but I think everyone does know, have a pretty good idea about the defensive starters. Let's kick it off here. Defensive starters, Deacon Jones. Come on. Of course, you knew Deacon Jones was going to be on this team. Deacon Jones was incredible. 8-time Pro Bowler, 5-time All-Pro, Hall of Famer. We don't have official sack stats, but he created the sack essentially. So, yeah, Deacon Jones was phenomenal, and he is our starting defensive end. Defensive tackles, Aaron Donald. He's the greatest player to ever lace up cleats in football. Maybe he's the greatest player in all of sports. Who knows? I don't know if I've ever seen anyone more dominant aside from maybe, I would say Wayne Gretzky, Aaron Donald, Barry Bonds, and that would pretty much be it. Aaron Donald, Wayne Gretzky, Barry Bonds, Jordan, LeBron James, whatever you want to say there. But the point I'm making here is you can call Tom Brady the GOAT, but the true best player of all time is Aaron Donald. There was nobody even close. Tiger Woods, I like that. So there's nobody even close. Aaron Donald was playing at 260-something pounds at defensive tackle and was taking on triple teams and was absolutely dominant every single year he ever played. Even his down years are better than everybody else. So, yes, Aaron Donald, absolutely. But he was starting on this the last time I did this back in, 2018. So that's not really a shock. Merlin Olsen. Okay. Merlin Olsen makes the team here. Obviously, he has the longevity on Donald. I think Donald's the greatest player ever, but Merlin Olsen had 14 Pro Bowls. Okay. Merlin Olsen had 5 times that he was an All-Pro. He had 202 games with the Rams, and he's a Hall of Famer. So he'll play next to Donald. And then Jack Youngblood, the Blood himself, played his full career with the Rams, 202 games. I mean, the thing is, 7-time Pro Bowler, 5-time All-Pro, played with a broken leg, Hall of Famer. Oh, I forgot to mention with Olsen, this is something that you never hear, okay? Get ready for this. Merlin Olsen was a Hall of Fame all 1960s team recipient and an all 1970s team recipient. This is football, folks. This isn't a game you're supposed to be able to play for 2 decades. He is on the all Hall of Fame team for 2 decades. Find me multiple players that did that. I've never even heard of that. I'm sure they exist, but that is absolutely insane and doesn't get talked about nearly enough. So yeah, Merlin Olsen was the guy. And then, of course, Jack Youngblood, like I said, also Hall of Famer. Isaiah Robertson, fantastic. The late, great Isaiah. I was actually going to get him on my show, and unfortunately he ended up passing away a few years ago. But absolutely fantastic player. 6-time Pro Bowler, 2-time All-Pro, 100-plus starts with the Rams. Does not get enough credit. Neither does Les Richter, by the way. 8-time Pro Bowler, All-Pro, played his entirety with the Rams. Hall of Famer, Les Richter. The greatest cornerback and defensive back in Rams history is none other than Jalen Ramsey. I put him on this list, but I put him on this list at the top because pound for pound, he is the best Rams defensive back in their franchise, okay? I don't think anybody's relatively close. The guy tackled like he was a linebacker. He covered like, he was a lockdown corner. I mean, he had great range. This is somebody that was a big, key component to getting over the hump and winning a Super Bowl. So yeah, shout out to Jalen Ramsey. Hopefully he gets to retire a Ram and come back at some point. You never know, but he's definitely on the all-time list for sure. And then you have Dick Night Train Lane, who, let me be honest with you, I'm well aware he only played 2 seasons. I also know he set the interceptions record in a single season. He's one of the greatest cornerbacks ever and was so dominant. It's hard because I like longevity. I like giving that credit, especially on these lists. But Night Train Lane was phenomenal, and you got to give him the nod. And then Jerry Gray. While it's tough here, I love Leroy Irvin. Okay, I went to his 60th birthday party. I'm a big fan of Leroy Irvin, but I had to go with Jerry Gray here as the third corner. Reason being, 4-time Pro Bowler, 2-time All-Pro second team. Just a fantastic player for the Rams. So obviously you have a really disgusting looking defense there. And then you go to the safeties, and I think people are going to be surprised at my choices here because I decided to go with Nolan Cromwell and Eddie Meter over Aeneas Williams. Now, keep in mind, Aeneas Williams was at the end of his career with the Rams, okay? I'm well aware of what he did. I'm a big fan of his, and he's in the backup version of this. He's on the backups. But Eddie Meter, whether you realize it or not, is the all-time leader in interceptions for Rams football, okay? There's a reason why he's on this list. And Nolan Cromwell's, in my opinion, he's the greatest all-around safety in Rams history. So he makes this list. So now we move on to the backups. And it wasn't easy, but here are the backups. We got Kevin Green at defensive end. We got Larry Brooks, defensive tackle. Rosie Greer, defensive tackle. Okay. You have Coy Bacon at defensive end. Bacon is one of the more underrated players in the sport. He had a year unofficially where he had 26 sacks with. He was having that type of production. The problem is Lamar Lundy was in his way. Now, Lamar Lundy should be an honorable mention because he was also great. But I think Coy Bacon was actually better. And that's what I would say there. Maxie Bond is another one of those guys that, multiple time Pro Bowler and everything. So he's a backup. Tank Younger, people look at as more of a running back. He played running back and linebacker. 4-time Pro Bowler, all pro, obvious add there. Then you have Leroy Irvin, who I previously mentioned, multiple Pro Bowls, fantastic returner, guy that he has the ball in his hands. He's taking it back for a pick six. Just a great all-around player. And, of course, a Jayhawk, my little Jayhawk bias there. Leroy Irvin would be the 4th cornerback on the team. Then Todd Light. Then Clancy Williams, who had 28 interceptions with the Rams. And then we have safeties Aeneas Williams and Dave Elmendorf, who were definitely the next best. I would say that there are some safeties out there. Oshimigo Atagwe is an honorable mention, but I would say those guys. It's tough with the all-time Rams because when you talk about this team, there are so many guys that were left off, okay? I see people saying like Leonard Little left off, Robert Quinn, Dre Bly. I love all of them. James Laurinaitis, I grew up with them. The reality is this is one of the greatest all-time rosters that imaginable. The Rams, while not given enough credit, while not maybe hoisting up 7 championships or anything like that, the reality is the Rams are one of the more historic franchises in football. They've had some of the craziest talents come through that door. And that's where we stand right now. Okay? And to wrap this thing up, we got the specialists. Okay? And I thought long and hard about this. I wanted to go with Greg Zuerlein or Jeff Wilkins, but at the end of the day, I came to the idea that Matt Gay is the greatest kicker in Rams history. He had over a 90% field goal rate. I don't care that he wasn't there for that long. He won a Super Bowl. He was very critical down the stretch. Zuerlein, of course, made the 58-yarder to send them to the Super Bowl, and he is the honorable mention here. But I had to go with Matt Gay. I don't think people realize how dominant he was, how sure of a thing he was. I don't know to this day how the Rams let that guy go, but he is the most accurate kicker in Rams history. And Johnny Hekker is by far not only the best Rams punter, he might be the best punter in NFL history. And then Chris Massey, this is crazy. You might not even know this, guys, but Chris Massey is the long snapper, only botched 1 snap. He had over 700 snaps with the Rams, played, I believe, around like 8 years, and he only missed 1 snap, okay? So, yes, he would be the long snapper. Tony Horn is the all-time leading kick returner for the Rams. And then Leroy Irvin, it's really kind of, it's a toss-up between him and I would say Henry Ellard, okay? Both guys, great punt returners. I would probably say either or. I don't see anybody kind of overtaking them anytime soon. If, recently retired Farrell Cooper stuck with the Rams, he could have taken over Tony Horn's spot. But I would say I felt really good about this list. All in all, it sucks to leave guys out. You're always going to be, people are always going to be upset when you do a list like this. You just have to understand what comes with the territory, okay? You have to understand when you're making a all-time list, you can't be biased. I mean, look at this team. I mean, this team is insane. And this is an all-time franchise. This is a franchise that has had, some of the best receivers to ever play the game, some of the best running backs to ever play the game, some of the best quarterbacks, right? Some of the best offensive linemen, defensive linemen. I mean, they have so much to feel good about all time. And it's not easy to make a team like this. It's not. I mean, when you look at the guys that are on this list, you look at the guys that aren't on this list. It's not easy. End of the day, I did, the best I could, folks. I hope you guys enjoyed this because, I always have fun doing these type of things. And the time to do an all-time Rams list is right now. It's in the middle of July, okay? It's that simple. You're not doing this during the season. You're doing this in the middle of July when it's dead and there's nothing else going on. It's right before, training camp. So I decided to do this and, obviously had a great time on Bleacher Report today. As always, I always do. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Appreciate you guys following along. And again, if you like this, be sure to follow me on all social media at JK Bogan. You could follow me right on the Bleacher Report app, JK Bogan. And I will see you guys in the next one. Again, thanks again, Bleacher Report, for having me. And you guys take care. Enjoy your weekend.